The sulphurous winds of Vokterra howled across the barren basalt plain, carrying particles of acid that would have scorched human flesh in seconds. Yet the delegation of Soltraxians stood proudly, their amphibious bodies glistening with protective mucus as they awaited the arrival of their human visitors. The elders of the delegation had positioned themselves strategically around the largest acid lake, eager to demonstrate their species' remarkable adaptations. Elder Hero Malura, her scales shimmering with iridescent blues and greens that marked her advanced age and status, surveyed the gathering with satisfaction. Today would prove to the universe what the Soltraxians had always known, that they alone had mastered the art of surviving in nature's most hostile environment. Their evolution had been forged in suffering, their civilization built on conquering the unconquerable. These humans, with their fragile bodies and dependence on technology, would finally understand what true resilience meant. "They approach," announced Scout Karis, her youthful voice carrying a barely concealed skepticism. The young Soltraxian's webbed fingers tightened around her ceremonial staff, her posture rigid with apprehension. Unlike the elders, Karis had been born after first contact, and while she shared her people's wariness of outsiders, she also harbored a forbidden curiosity about Earth and its legendary oceans of clear, harmless water. The human transport vessel descended through Vokterra's perpetual yellow haze, its engines adjusting to compensate for the caustic atmosphere. It landed with remarkable precision on a flat expanse of solidified mineral crust, and after a series of mechanical hisses and clicks, a hatch opened to reveal the visitors. Commander Elena Park emerged first, her specialized hazard suit gleaming white against the blackness of the plane. Despite the suit's bulk, she moved with practiced ease, her steps confident as she approached the Soltraxian delegation. Behind her followed 4 other humans, each carrying equipment designed to monitor and analyze Vokterra's hostile environment. "Elder Malura," Elena said, her voice slightly distorted through her helmet's communication system. She performed the traditional Soltraxian greeting, pressing her gloved hand against her chest and extending it outward in a flowing motion. "On behalf of Earth's scientific coalition, we thank you for this opportunity to witness your people's remarkable adaptations firsthand." Malura's facial gills flared slightly in acknowledgement. "Commander Park, we welcome you to the true face of Vokterra, not the sanitized environments you have previously visited." She gestured toward the bubbling acid lake behind her. "Today, you will observe how the Soltraxian people have conquered what your kind would consider uninhabitable." Elena nodded respectfully, though behind her visor, her eyes were already scanning the landscape with the practiced assessment of a geologist. This expedition represented years of diplomatic effort, and, as team leader, she was determined to forge a genuine connection with the Soltraxians, despite their notorious isolationism. The demonstration began with younger Soltraxians showcasing their ability to traverse the floating mineral islands, their bodies excreting specialized enzymes that neutralized the corrosive effects of the environment. Elders demonstrated how they could extract nutrients from toxic fungi that would have killed a human instantly. Throughout it all, Elena and her team recorded data, exchanged impressed glances, and maintained a respectful distance. Then came the moment Malura had been anticipating. With ceremonial gravity, she approached the edge of the largest acid lake, its surface bubbling with sulfuric activity. "What you are about to witness," she announced to the humans, "is the culmination of our evolutionary journey. This lake contains enough acid to dissolve your vessel within hours. Yet to us, it is a place of communion with our world's essence." With that, Malura dove into the hissing liquid, her body executing a perfect arc before disappearing beneath the surface. The other Soltraxians trilled in appreciation of the elder's form. Moments later, Malura resurfaced, her scales now glowing with an almost phosphorescent light, the mark of having absorbed beneficial minerals from the lake's depths. It was at this precise moment that Elena Park did something that would forever change the relationship between their species. Calmly, methodically, She reached up and disengaged her helmet's seal. The Sultraxians froze in collective horror, certain they were about to witness the human self-destruction. But instead of collapsing in agony as the toxic atmosphere reached her lungs, Elena smiled. She walked toward a small, steaming pool several meters away from the acid lake, a feature the Sultraxians had always dismissed as insignificant. Kneeling beside it, she removed her glove and dipped her bare hand into the water. "Commander Park!" cried Naveen Shah, the team's engineer, starting forward in alarm. "Our sensors haven't fully—" Elena silenced him with a raised hand, then brought a small amount of the steaming water to her lips and sipped. The Sultraxians watched in stupefied silence. "It's perfectly safe," she announced, her voice now clear without the helmet's filtration. "In fact, it's rather pleasant, warm and mineral-rich, like the hot springs of Earth." Melura emerged fully from the acid lake, her astonishment evident in the rapid fluttering of her throat membranes. "Impossible," she declared. "Nothing on Vokterra is safe for your kind without protection." Elena smiled again, wider this time. "That's what we've all been led to believe, Elder Melura. But my team's preliminary survey suggested otherwise. These hot springs," she gestured to the bubbling pool, "represent an entirely different chemical composition from the surrounding terrain. They're not toxic at all." The revelation hung in the sulphurous air, a challenge to everything the Sultraxians believed about their world and their unique place within it. Before Melura could formulate a response, the ground beneath them shuddered violently. A distant volcanic cone, previously dormant, had suddenly erupted, sending tremors across the plain. The vibrations triggered a chain reaction as pressurized pockets of gas beneath the mineral crust began to rupture. Directly beside the Sultraxian delegation, a geyser of luminescent green liquid burst forth, spraying highly concentrated acid in all directions. The Sultraxians scattered, their natural defenses insufficient against this particularly virulent compound. Even their containment specialists, rushing forward with neutralizing tools, found themselves overwhelmed by the sudden crisis. "Fall back!" Elena shouted to her team, instinctively reaching for her discarded helmet. But as she surveyed the rapidly deteriorating situation, she saw that the toxic cloud was spreading too quickly. The Sultraxians were retreating in disarray, and several, including young Caris, had been cut off from the main group by spreading pools of acid. It was Dr. Naveen Shah who spotted their salvation. "Commander, look there!" He pointed toward a rocky outcropping where several clear but steaming pools were visible, clustered like oases amid the chaos. Elena didn't hesitate. "Everyone to the hot springs," she called out, her voice cutting through the panic. When the Sultraxians hesitated, torn between following this human directive and their own emergency protocols, Elena grabbed Melura by her arm, a shocking breach of etiquette that nevertheless conveyed the urgency of the situation. "Trust me," she said directly to the elder, their faces now inches apart. "Those springs will neutralize the acid. They're safe for both our species." Something in Elena's certainty reached through Melura's pride and skepticism. The elder gave a sharp series of commands in the Sultraxian language, and her people changed direction, following Elena's team toward the hot springs. They reached the rocky shelter just as the toxic cloud engulfed their previous position. Humans and Sultraxians crowded into the largest of the springs, its warm waters rising around them. The younger Sultraxians recoiled initially from the unfamiliar sensation, so different from the bracing burn of their acid lakes, but soon relaxed as they realized the waters were indeed harmless. As they huddled together, watching the chemical storm rage across the plain, Elena noticed something remarkable, where droplets of acid rain fell into the hot springs. They sizzled briefly before being neutralized, rendered harmless by the spring's mineral composition. "Look," she said quietly to Melura. "The water isn't just safe, it's actively counteracting the toxicity." Malura observed the phenomenon, her scientific mind engaging despite her cultural shock. These springs, we have always considered them anomalies, weak points in Vokterra's harsh embrace, not worthy of attention. On Earth, Elena explained, hot springs often form unique micro-environments. They create spaces where life can flourish in otherwise inhospitable regions. They're not weak points, they're sanctuaries. As the immediate danger passed and the delegation emerged from their refuge, the dynamics between the two species had subtly but fundamentally shifted. The humans had demonstrated knowledge of Vokterra that the Soltraxians themselves lacked, while the Soltraxians had revealed vulnerabilities they had long denied. In the expedition base established near the discovered hot springs, tensions simmered between tradition and revelation. The Soltraxian elders convened in heated debate, while Elena's team conducted further analysis of the spring's composition. "These readings are fascinating," Dr. Shah told Elena as they reviewed data in the laboratory module. "The springs contain a unique combination of minerals that neutralize the surrounding toxins. It's like they're creating environmental bubbles where the harsh conditions of Vokterra simply don't apply." Elena nodded thoughtfully. "The question is, how extensive are these springs? Could they form the basis of habitable zones across the planet?" "If my calculations are correct," Shah replied, his dark eyes alight with possibility, "there could be thousands of such springs distributed across Vokterra's crust. Together, they might constitute up to 15% of the planet's surface area." The implications were staggering. For generations, the Soltraxians had prided themselves on their ability to endure Vokterra's hostility, building their entire cultural identity around this struggle. The discovery of naturally occurring safe zones challenged not just their scientific understanding, but the very foundation of their society. Outside the human facility, Scout Carice lingered, ostensibly on guard duty but increasingly drawn by curiosity. She had been among those caught in the acid storm and saved by the hot springs. The experience had left her with questions that the traditional teachings couldn't answer. Elena, emerging from the lab for some fresh air, now possible without a helmet in the vicinity of the springs, noticed the young Soltraxian's interest. "Would you like to see what we've discovered?" she offered, gesturing toward the entrance. Carice stiffened, her dorsal spines rising slightly in alarm at being addressed directly. "I am assigned to maintain perimeter security," she responded formally. Elena smiled. "Of course, but since your duty is to watch us, wouldn't it be more effective to observe from inside?" The logic was impeccable, and Carice found herself following the human commander into the facility, her webbed feet padding softly on the sterile floor. Inside, Dr. Shah was projecting a three-dimensional map of thermal activity across Vokterra. "As you can see," he explained to Carice, warming to his subject despite her obvious discomfort, "the hot springs follow specific geological patterns. They're not random anomalies. They're part of a planetary system." Carice stared at the glowing projection, her natural scientific curiosity overcoming her cultural reservations. "But our histories make no mention of such patterns. Our ancestors conquered the acid and fire through adaptation, not by seeking easier paths." "Perhaps they didn't have the technology to detect these patterns," Elena suggested gently. "Or perhaps understanding has evolved, just as your people have evolved." Before Carice could respond, the facility's doors hissed open to admit Elder Malura, accompanied by two senior Soltraxian scientists. Their expressions were unreadable to human eyes, but the rigid set of their posture suggested conflict. "Commander Park," Malura announced formally, "the Council of Elders has deliberated regarding your discovery. While we acknowledge the scientific validity of your findings, we have concerns about their broader dissemination." Elena straightened, recognizing the diplomatic minefield they were entering. "What concerns you, Elder?" Malura's gills fluttered in agitation. "For generations, Our people have defined themselves by their mastery of Vokterra's challenges. Our social structures, our religious practices, even our mating rituals are built around proving one's ability to endure what others cannot. She gestured toward the thermal map. If these safe zones become common knowledge, it could destabilize our entire civilization. Oh, Elena counted carefully. It could save countless lives. From what we've observed, even Soltraxians can be overwhelmed by sudden environmental changes, as we witnessed during the eruption. Suffering builds strength, insisted one of the scientists accompanying Malura. It is through challenge that we have become who we are. Dr. Shah, sensing the escalating tension, intervened with the practiced neutrality of a scientist. Perhaps we could approach this as a collaborative research opportunity, he suggested. Our teams working together to fully understand the implications before any public announcements are made. Malura considered this compromise, her ancient eyes calculating potential outcomes. Acceptable, but with conditions. Your research must remain within this facility. No communications regarding the hot springs may be transmitted to your superiors without our review. Elena hesitated, balancing scientific integrity against diplomatic necessity. We can agree to research restrictions for now, she conceded. But ultimately, knowledge serves its highest purpose when shared. The tense negotiation was interrupted by an alarm from the monitoring systems. Dr. Shah rushed to the console, his fingers flying over the controls. Seismic activity, he reported, originating from the same volcanic system as before, but magnitude stronger. If these readings are accurate, we could be looking at a major geological event. Elena and Malura exchanged glances, mutual concern temporarily overriding their philosophical differences. How much time do we have? Elena asked. Hours, perhaps, Shah replied grimly, and the predicted eruption path would threaten several Soltraxian settlements. Malura's composure faltered for the first time. The western enclaves lie directly in that path. Over 10,000 of my people reside there. Can they be evacuated? Elena asked urgently. Not through conventional means, Malura admitted. The surrounding terrain is too hostile for mass movement, especially with the increased toxicity that would accompany an eruption. A tense silence fell over the group, broken unexpectedly by Scout Keris. The springs, she said softly, then more confidently as all eyes turned to her. If the commander's theory is correct, there should be hot springs near the western enclaves as well. They could provide sanctuary during the eruption. Elena nodded encouragingly. Dr. Shah, can you extend the thermal mapping to focus on that region? Shah adjusted the projection, revealing several significant heat signatures near the threatened settlements. There, he confirmed. Multiple springs, potentially large enough to shelter the population. We must inform them immediately, Elena insisted. Malura's internal conflict was visible in the rapid color changes rippling across her scales. To direct my people to seek shelter in what we have always considered weak points. It contradicts everything we have taught. Sometimes survival requires us to reconsider our most cherished beliefs, Elena said gently. I've had to learn that lesson myself. Something in her tone caught Malura's attention. You speak from experience, Commander? Elena's gaze grew distant. 5 years ago, I led an expedition to Titan. We encountered a methane storm that our models hadn't predicted. Protocol dictated we maintain our position in our reinforced shelters. Her voice tightened with old pain. I followed protocol. 3 of my team died when their shelter was compromised. Later analysis showed that if we had abandoned our equipment and sought natural caverns instead, everyone would have survived. The personal revelation shifted something in the dynamic between them. Malura recognized in Elena not just a scientist or diplomat, but a leader who had faced her own crucible of difficult choices. Very well, the elder decided. We will alert the western enclaves to prepare for evacuation to the springs. But, she added firmly, This remains an internal Soltraxian matter. Your team will provide scientific support only." Elena agreed, and preparations began immediately. Dr. Shah worked with Soltraxian scientists to refine the thermal maps, identifying the most stable springs with sufficient capacity. Elena coordinated with Malura on evacuation logistics, while Caris was dispatched as a messenger to the enclaves, carrying both the warning and the controversial directive to seek the springs. As predicted, the volcanic system erupted within hours, sending rivers of molten acid flowing toward the settlements. The Soltraxian emergency response was impressive in its efficiency, but not without resistance. Many elders and traditionalists refused to abandon their homes for the untested sanctuary of the springs, despite Caris's impassioned arguments. In the end, about 80% of the population followed the evacuation order, gathering in and around the largest hot springs as toxic clouds billowed overhead. Elena and her team, permitted to observe from a distance, watched as the Soltraxians gradually adapted to the unfamiliar environment, their initial discomfort giving way to cautious appreciation as the spring's protective properties became evident. The crisis passed, and as the toxic aftermath began to dissipate, news of the successful evacuation spread across Vokterra. The hot springs, long ignored or dismissed, became a topic of intense debate among Soltraxian communities. Some embraced the discovery as a revelation that could improve their quality of life. Others condemned it as a threat to their traditional values and evolutionary advantages. It was in this climate of cultural upheaval that a radical faction made their move. Dr. Shah, working late in the laboratory to analyze spring samples from across the planet, was alone when they struck. 4 Soltraxians, their faces concealed by ceremonial masks used in their most sacred rites, disabled the facility's security systems and abducted the engineer, along with his critical research equipment. Elena was awakened by the facility's backup alarms to find Shah missing and the laboratory in disarray. Security footage revealed the identities of the kidnappers, members of the Purist Covenant, a fringe group dedicated to preserving Soltraxian traditions against outside influence. "They've taken him to the acid trenches," Malura determined after reviewing the evidence. "An ancient, sacred site, virtually inaccessible to outsiders." "Sacred or not, we need to go after them," Elena insisted, already gathering emergency equipment. "You misunderstand," Malura said grimly. "The trenches are not merely difficult terrain. They are deliberately maintained as the most hostile environment on Vokterra. The Purists conduct their most extreme rituals there, testing themselves against conditions that would kill even most Soltraxians without specific preparation." Elena's determination didn't waver. "Then I'll need a guide." "You would need more than guidance, Commander. You would need a miracle to survive there." "Or," came Caris's voice from the doorway, "she would need knowledge of the hidden thermal vents that traverse the region." Both Elena and Malura turned in surprise. Caris stepped forward, her youthful confidence tempered with newfound purpose. "During my time as messenger to the Western enclaves, I studied the commander's thermal maps extensively," she explained. "They revealed pathways through the trenches that follow subterranean hot springs, pathways our ancestors may once have known but have since forgotten." Malura's expression shifted between outrage at this apparent betrayal of Soltraxian secrets and reluctant admiration for the young scout's initiative. "Even if such paths exist," the elder argued, "they would not protect human physiology from the trench's extremes." "Actually," Elena interjected, "my suit incorporates Dr. Shah's latest adaptations based on our hot spring research. It should provide sufficient protection if these thermal pathways are as consistent as Caris suggests." A standoff ensued, with Malura caught between her duty to Soltraxian tradition and her growing respect for the human commander. In the end, it was her personal code of honor that decided the matter. "I cannot allow you to risk yourself alone in defense of your colleague," she declared. "If you are determined to attempt this rescue, I will accompany you." And so, An unlikely rescue party was formed. Elena Park with her modified environmental suit, Elder Melura with her lifetime of experience navigating Vokterra's hazards, and Scout Karis with her revolutionary knowledge of the planet's hidden thermal networks. They departed at dawn, traveling in a small Soltraxian vessel capable of skimming the surface of the acid plains. As they journeyed, the landscape grew increasingly forbidding. The familiar black basalt gave way to jagged crystalline formations that refracted the sulfurous light into disorienting patterns. The air itself seemed to thicken with toxins that made even Melura's breathing labored. "The acid trenches lie beyond that ridge," Melura informed Elena, pointing toward a serrated horizon. "From this point forward, we must proceed on foot to avoid detection." Karis guided them along nearly invisible paths where the ground steamed subtly, indicating the presence of hot springs flowing beneath the thin crust. These thermal lines allowed them to avoid the worst concentrations of toxic gas and provided periodic refuge when the environment became too extreme even for Melura's adaptations. As they ventured deeper into the trenches, they encountered fields of crystalline fungi, their surfaces glistening with psychoactive compounds that vaporized in the heat. "Do not breathe deeply here," Melura warned. "These spores induce visions that have driven many to walk willingly into acid pools." Despite their precautions, the hallucinogenic environment began to affect them all. Elena's perception distorted, the crystalline landscape appearing to pulse with malevolent intelligence. Karis became disoriented, her thermal sense confused by the overwhelming stimuli. Even Melura struggled to maintain her legendary composure. It was Elena who spotted the purest compound first, a series of structures carved directly into a cliff face overlooking the deepest trench, where pure acid flowed like a river. The buildings were designed to channel toxic vapors throughout their interiors, creating an environment that would continually test the inhabitants' endurance. "There," she whispered, pointing to a secondary structure where unusual equipment was visible. Dr. Shah's specialized analytical devices, repurposed by the purists for their own enigmatic goals. "Shah must be inside," Elena concluded. "But how do we approach without being detected?" Karis, having partially recovered her equilibrium, studied the compound with practiced eyes. "The thermal path continues beneath the cliff. There may be access points within their sacred chambers, places they would not guard because no outsider should be able to reach them." Melura nodded reluctantly. "The Chamber of Ancestral Waters. It was built around a natural spring, though its properties were never understood as we now understand them. Their infiltration plan was dangerous but direct. Using Karis's knowledge of the thermal pathways, they would approach underwater, through a series of connected hot springs that ran beneath the compound. The risk was immense. A single misstep would lead them into acid rather than healing waters. But no conventional approach would succeed against the vigilant purists. Elena checked her suit's integrity one final time. The specialized fabric, inspired by Soltraxian biology and enhanced by Shah's innovations, would protect her from brief acid exposure, but couldn't withstand prolonged immersion. Her oxygen supply was limited to 3 hours. Whatever they planned to do, it would need to happen quickly. "Remember," Melura cautioned as they prepared to descend into the first spring, "we seek only to retrieve your colleague and his research. We cannot afford confrontation with the entire purist faction." Elena nodded grimly. "Get in, get Shah, get out. No heroics." They submerged into the clear, warm waters, following Karis's lead through a labyrinthine system of underwater passages. The journey was claustrophobic and disorienting, with only occasional air pockets providing relief from the mounting pressure in their lungs. Multiple times they reached junctions where the wrong choice meant death, relying entirely on Karis's newly developed sense for the subtle temperature variations that distinguished safe water from deadly acid. Finally, they emerged in a small, steam-filled chamber deep within the purest compound. Ancient Soltraxian glyphs covered the walls, telling the story of their species' evolution and celebrating their triumph over Vokterra's hostility. The Chamber of Ancestral Waters, Malura confirmed in a whisper. From here, we can access the main ritual spaces. Moving stealthily through the vapor-filled corridors, they evaded the few guards posted inside the compound. Most purists were gathered in the central chamber, where a ceremony appeared to be in progress. From their concealed position, Elena could see Dr. Shah restrained on a platform, his equipment arranged around him like religious artifacts. Before him stood an elderly Soltraxian whose scales bore the deep scarring of countless acid immersions. Unlike Malura's iridescent coloration, this elder's body was a patchwork of regenerated tissue, testifying to a lifetime of deliberate exposure to Vokterra's most extreme conditions. That is Zorlath, Malura breathed, a note of reverence in her voice despite the circumstances. My former mentor and the spiritual leader of the purist movement. He has survived trials that would kill any other Soltraxian. Elena studied the scene, assessing options. What are they planning? By the arrangement of the ceremonial items. Carice analyzed. They intend to destroy the human's research equipment as part of a purification ritual. They believe it threatens our way of life. Malura's expression darkened. Zorlath taught me that adaptation must be earned through suffering, not circumvented through technology or outside knowledge. He sees the hot springs as a shortcut that would weaken our species. As they watched, Zorlath addressed the assembled purists, his voice carrying easily through the chamber's perfect acoustics. For countless generations, our people have proven themselves worthy of survival by embracing Vokterra's challenges, he proclaimed. We have thrived where others would perish because we refused the easy path. Our bodies bear the honorable scars of this covenant with our world. He gestured toward Shah, who remained remarkably composed despite his precarious situation. Now these outsiders offer us a different covenant, one that promises comfort without cost, survival without sacrifice. They would have us abandon the very crucible that forged our greatness. A murmur of agreement rose from the gathered purists. Zorlath raised a ceremonial blade, its edge glistening with concentrated acid. With this ritual, we reject their false promises. We recommit ourselves to the true path of the Soltraxian people, the path of worthy suffering. Elena had seen enough. We need to act now, she whispered urgently. Malura hesitated, torn between her respect for her former mentor and her evolving understanding of collaboration with humans. There are too many. We cannot fight our way through. Then we don't fight, Elena decided. We reason. Before Malura could stop her, Elena stepped out from their hiding place and walked calmly into the chamber. A shocked silence fell over the assembly. Zorlath, she called, her voice steady despite the numerous purists now moving to surround her. I am Commander Elena Park of Earth. I've come for my colleague and to offer a perspective you may not have considered. The elderly Soltraxian regarded her with genuine astonishment. You have survived the acid trenches, he observed, making no move to stop his followers from encircling her. An impressive feat for a human, even with your technological shields. I didn't survive alone, Elena replied, nodding toward the passage where Malura now emerged, followed reluctantly by Carice. I had guidance from those who understand both Soltraxian tradition and new possibilities. Zorlath's surprise deepened at the sight of Malura. My most promising student, he acknowledged. I did not expect you to align yourself with these outsiders. I have not abandoned our ways. Teacher, Malura responded respectfully. I have expanded my understanding of them. Zorlath gestured for his followers to step back, his curiosity evidently piqued by this unexpected confrontation. Speak then. Human, what perspective could you possibly offer that would change what we know of our own world? Elena chose her words carefully, aware that the lives of her team depended on her persuasiveness. You believe that strength comes only through overcoming hardship, that adaptation must be earned through suffering. This is a powerful truth that has served your people well. She moved closer to the central platform, establishing eye contact with Shah, who gave her a subtle nod to indicate he was unharmed. But consider this. True adaptation isn't about enduring unchanged in a hostile environment. It's about recognizing and utilizing all available resources to thrive. She gestured around the chamber. This very room celebrates your ancestors' wisdom in finding the hot springs. Does it not? They recognize their value, even if they didn't understand their full properties. Zorlath's expression remained impassive, but he did not interrupt. The greatest strength, Elena continued, often lies not in isolation but in unity, not in rejecting new knowledge, but in integrating it with ancient wisdom. Humans and Soltraxians have evolved differently, developed different strengths and insights. Together, we can achieve what neither could alone. Pretty words, Zorlath dismissed, but they change nothing. Our identity is forged in adversity. Take that away, and what remains of the Soltraxian spirit? Your courage, came Carissa's voice, unexpectedly firm as she stepped forward. Your innovation, your resilience. These qualities aren't dependent on suffering, they're intrinsic to who you are. The young scout's intervention created a ripple of murmurs among the purists. Many recognized her as one of their own younger generation, previously committed to traditional values. The hot springs don't diminish our heritage, Cariss insisted, addressing not just Zorlath, but the entire assembly. They expand it. They represent another way our ancestors adapted, by finding safety amid danger, by creating communities where knowledge could be preserved and shared. As Cariss spoke, Elena noticed movement in the shadows behind the platform. Other Soltraxians were entering through concealed passages, ones that, based on their positioning, likely connected to the same thermal network they had used. Zorlath noticed them too, his eyes narrowing. Who dares interrupt our sacred ceremony? The leader of the newcomers stepped forward, a middle-aged Soltraxian female whose ceremonial garments identified her as a representative of the Western enclaves. We come bearing testimony, she announced formally. During the recent eruption, our people found sanctuary in the hot springs, as directed by Scout Cariss and Elder Malura. Many who would have perished survived because of this knowledge shared by the humans. She gestured to several Soltraxians behind her who bore the unmistakable marks of severe acid exposure, partially healed wounds that would have been fatal without intervention. More importantly, she continued, those who took refuge in the springs discovered something unexpected. The waters didn't weaken us or make us dependent. They provided a place of healing where we could gather strength for the challenges ahead. One by one, survivors stepped forward to share their experiences. Some spoke of injuries healed more quickly than ever before. Others described how the respite allowed them to devise new protective measures against future disasters. All emphasized that their appreciation for Vokterra's challenges remained unchanged, but their capacity to meet those challenges had been enhanced. Throughout these testimonials, Elena observed Zorlath closely. The elderly Soltraxian's rigid certainty seemed to waver, if only slightly. When the last survivor had spoken, he remained silent for a long moment, his ancient eyes calculating unseen possibilities. You have traveled far to retrieve your colleague, he finally addressed Elena. And these witnesses have traveled equally far to challenge my understanding. Both journeys demonstrate conviction worthy of respect. He turned to Malura. You were always my most thoughtful student. When you chose to cooperate with the humans, I believed you had succumbed to weakness. Perhaps instead you were demonstrating a different kind of strength, the strength to reconsider cherished beliefs in light of new evidence. The tension in the chamber gradually subsided as Zorlath signaled his followers to release Dr. Shah and return his equipment. The purist leader had not abandoned his principles, but he had acknowledged the legitimacy of the debate. Our conversation is not concluded, he warned, as Elena helped Shah gather his research materials. The path forward for our people must be determined by careful consideration, not hasty embrace of change. All we ask is that the consideration be truly open, Elena responded, that the benefits of cooperation be weighed alongside the value of self-reliance. As they prepared to depart, Caris approached Elena with newfound confidence. I will guide you back through the thermal pathways, she offered. They will be easier to navigate now that we have traveled them once. Their return journey proved less harrowing than their infiltration. Word of the confrontation at the Purist compound spread rapidly across Vocterra, catalyzing discussions in Soltraxian communities everywhere. The discovery of the hot springs' properties had irrevocably altered the planet's cultural landscape, though the full implications would take generations to unfold. In the following weeks, Elena's team worked closely with Malura and a growing contingent of progressive Soltraxians to establish a comprehensive map of thermal resources across Vocterra. Dr. Shah's research revealed that the springs contain not only neutralizing minerals, but regenerative compounds that could accelerate healing for both species, opening new possibilities for medical collaboration. The most significant development, however, was the Joint Thermal Initiative, a program that combined human technology with Soltraxian ecological knowledge to create expanded sanctuaries around major spring systems. These areas served as both emergency shelters during environmental crises and as centers for cultural exchange, where the strengths of both species could be shared and celebrated. On the eve of the human delegation's departure from Vocterra, Elena stood with Malura beside the original hot spring that had sparked their journey together. The once dismissed pool had been incorporated into a modest research facility, its waters now understood as part of a planetary system that had shaped Vocterra's geology for millennia. When my people first evolved the adaptations to survive in acid, Malura reflected, they believed they had conquered nature through sheer determination. Now we understand that nature itself provided alternatives, different paths to survival that we overlooked in our focus on a single strategy. Elena nodded thoughtfully. Earth's history tells similar stories. We often mistake one successful approach for the only approach, one strength for the only kind of strength. What will you tell your superiors when you return? Malura asked. Will you describe us as a species in transition, abandoning our heritage? No, Elena answered firmly. I'll describe you as a species embracing the fullness of your heritage, not just the aspects defined by struggle, but also those characterized by discovery and growth. She smiled. Just as I've had to embrace that leadership means knowing when to follow protocol and when to seek unexpected solutions. As they watched the twin suns of Vocterra descend toward the horizon, painting the sulphurous clouds in striking oranges and purples, Scout Caris approached with several young Soltraxians, students selected for an unprecedented exchange program that would bring them to Earth's scientific academies. The first ambassadors of a new era, Elena observed approvingly. And not the last, Malura affirmed. Sorlath himself has agreed to address the next delegation from Earth, to share the traditional wisdom that remains valuable even as we incorporate new understanding. The unlikely alliance forged in crisis had evolved into something more profound, a recognition that true resilience emerges not from isolation but from the creative tension between tradition and innovation, between honoring hard-won adaptations and remaining open to unexpected discoveries. As Elena prepared to board the transport vessel that would carry her team back to Earth, she reflected on the fundamental question that had defined their expedition. Is survival strengthened by isolating ourselves in extremes, or by seeking the unexpected common ground that renews life? The answer, she had come to believe, was neither one nor the other, but a dynamic balance between both approaches, a balance the Soltraxians were now beginning to explore in their own unique way, just as humanity continued to explore it in theirs. The hot springs of Vocterra, once dismissed as anomalies unworthy of attention, now stood as symbols of this balance, places where the harsh and the healing coexisted, where different paths to survival converged, and where two species had discovered that their greatest strength lay not in what separated them, but in what they could learn from each other.